Anita, how's your mental health?
Questionable at all times. You know this.
Yeah, how's the mental health of your children?
Also a little bit tricky. Can I tell you my experience in trying to find therapists for myself and my kids, Mel?
Yes, please.
Okay, this is how it goes. You ask around your friends and your family for a referral for somebody who's nearby. You finally find somebody who sounds like they might work for your family. You give them a call and you find out that A, they're not accepting new patients, or B, they have a huge wait list. So you start over again and you ask people if they know anybody who would be a good therapist and a good fit. Finally, you find one, you go and you meet with them and you figure out that you don't actually like them that much. But it's been so much work to find somebody who you can go to in your area that you're kind of stuck with them. Well, do you have any ideas for how to get around this?
I do, because guess what? I've actually had some therapists that I have found on my own, which involves what you're saying. Sometimes, I remember one time I was like 3 hours in the bathtub on my phone looking through websites. I was such a prune at the end. But I have also had the experience with working with BetterHelp. And it was like, I don't want to say too good to be true, but because it is true, but it's like amazing because I was matched with my therapist within 24 hours.
And you didn't have to go through all of that other ridiculous process of trying to find somebody. And here's the cool thing too, is if that person didn't work out for you, you can just switch and say, and it's not like you're committing to another years long search for somebody who you're going to jive with.
It's true. And I lucked out, or maybe just BetterHelp is really good at matching people together because I never had to change my therapist. I loved her. Perfect fit for me. And I know that some of our friends have used BetterHelp and they've had to change therapists, and boom, same day, you can change.
Easy peasy.
You can ghost your therapist. Get a new one.
I love this idea. BetterHelp is one of our sponsors. If you use our promo code trybetterhelp.com/WWDN, you get 10% off your first month. And we totally recommend it.
Yes. Get some therapy. That's trybetterhelp.com/WWDN. Anita!
Mel.
Halloween was yesterday.
Do you know what that makes today?
November 1st?
It's Dia de los Muertos today.
Oh, cool. That's perfect.
Today is the day you're supposed to remember your deed.
Your what?
Your deed. You're dead.
Oh.
In a Scottish accent.
Oh, nice.
Your deed!
David Kelly's the only one that just understood you.
Except for he probably was like, well, that didn't sound right at all.
I know. Well, I'm really feeling the dead situation because Scott's third deathiversary is coming up.
I know, it's this week.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like there's a lot of people whose deathiversaries are this week, too.
Yeah. Weird. What is
Some of our
it?
past guests. Yeah, what's with November?
I don't know.
We went to the cemetery today to Dia de los Muertos. And my kids are so hopped up on sugar that we couldn't even stay there because they were going to like knock down a headstone or something. So I was like, get back in the car. We're going back home. So that lasted for a few minutes. I just wanted to go there and be by myself, though, but that wasn't an option.
What's happening with your headstone situation these days? Should I not ask?
Funny. You can ask because my kids, like there's people... It's kind of funny because all around him, it's like pop, 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 pop. Like all these headstones are popping up all around Jason. So he's like the only one who doesn't have a headstone. So when we showed up today, my daughter, no, actually it was my son. He's like, did we get a headstone? And I was like, no. And then they're like, why? You know, they don't understand my weird feelings about that. So then they're like, why does everybody else have one, but Dad doesn't have one? Don't you think Dad should have one? And I'm like, shut up. I don't want to talk about it.
Well, I want to talk about it, so I'm going to ask you something. Do you feel any different towards the headstone situation than you felt from the beginning?
Yes. Yes, I do.
How do you feel right now? Worse?
No. I feel less stressed about it. Like, I don't think about it all the time.
Oh, good.
You know what I'm saying? Like, what do I need to put on it? And actually, the other day, I was like, you know what? Just go buy one. But then I didn't because life is too busy. So it still just is the same.
I think Jersey's eating a plastic bottle. What are you doing?
Oh, gosh. Just a minute ago, my 4-year-old... You probably don't know what a nose Frida is.
Oh,
It's like-
yeah. I've heard of it.
It's like the thing that sucks the snot out of your nose.
Oh, I thought it was like Fritos, like for Dia de los Muertos.
No, he had it in his mouth and like the other part in his ear, and he was like making noises. And I'm like, do you know what that is? That's like a snot sucker. So your dog is chewing on a plastic bottle, and my dog, my child was playing with the snot sucker.
All right.
So.
That sounds about right.
So guess what I have done the last couple days?
What?
I've been re-listening to all of our episodes. I went back to the very beginning and listened to them.
Oh?
We were a disaster.
Were we? Why?
Yeah, a little bit. I don't know. We were just everywhere, here, there, everywhere.
That's normal.
I'm kind of surprised people kept listening till we kind of found our like groove.
That was so funny.
Yeah.
But also, you have a very linear brain,
Yes.
and I don't, so it's never bothered me.
I know. It's just funny to listen to it because I'm just like, man, people have to get through like 5 or 6 episodes where we're not quite sure what we're doing before we kind of start to figure it out.
I love watching even stuff like TV shows. It's so fun when you finish a whole series and then you go back to the very beginning and watch it. You can tell that they're settling into their groove, and it takes several episodes. So that always makes me feel better with
develop the characters.
Yeah, that always
like we have to develop our characters.
Yeah, well, and then sometimes with those contracts, they don't know if they're going to have another season or if they're going to get funding,
right? And
so they have to just fill content for a certain amount. So I kind of feel like that with this, where it's like, well, yeah, we were figuring it out, and now it is how it is right now. And maybe next year when we listen back, we'll still feel the same, like, oh gosh.
Probably. We'll be like, man, we were still figuring that out. But now I do feel like we have a little bit more of a pattern. There's more logic to what's going on. So it's a good thing.
I just would like the record to show that the logic is only a problem in your brain. You guys,
okay.
Anita is getting so used to working in the entertainment business that this is all new for her and bothersome.
Yeah, if we call this entertainment, yeah.
You know what you would hate doing so much? So much.
What?
You would hate working on a movie set.
Actually, that's so funny because I have a friend who's been doing that a lot lately. And I'm like, that would be so fun. And she's like, it takes like 7.5 hours to film like 1 minute.
Yep, exactly.
And you just like sit around and then but the thing about that is that if I wasn't in charge of it, it would be okay.
You think that, but guess what? As somebody who does not have any control issues, I wanted to pull my hair out.
Oh.
So much. I did the, This is when
you were the hand.
Yes, this is so ridiculous. I was the hand double for all of the High School Musical movies, the piano hand double. And so I would have to go and sit through the filming, and sometimes they would get to you and sometimes they would not. And you'd watch the flow of everything and you would think, this is so inefficient. When is this going to happen? Like, they don't film stuff in order. There was one scene I remember, I think it was in the first movie, where the main 2 characters, all they had to do was come out from the hall into an opening of a doorway with a garbage can, like a janitor thing with a mop, and just appear. Guess how long it took to film that scene over and over and over? Guess. It was like a 3-second clip.
3 hours.
8.
What?
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
oh man.
Anyway, we're both grumpy as usual, but this is kind of normal for us this time of year.
How was your Halloween, my dear?
Well, I was on drugs because I started feeling violent towards all living things because I realized something was wrong. I was having a PTSD moment, I think. It took me a few hours to realize it. And then I thought, oh yeah, I am in the middle of like a flashback sort of a scenario. So, because it was the last day.
You and Scott, it was the last day you guys hung out, was Halloween.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think that's so interesting. And I found that in myself too, that even if you're not consciously aware of a date, your body is aware of it.
Yeah.
And it can be like super grumpy or angry. And even if you haven't thought like, oh, today is going to be a bad day. Today is a sad day for this and this reason. It's still just like programmed into you.
Yeah. It's in your cells.
Weird.
It is super weird. Because actually yesterday I had an awesome day. I was exercising. I was playing tennis with my dad. I was in the workflow. I thought everything was going to be amazing. And then as the day went on, there was more and more chaos in the house. And then I can really tell when the dogs' noses start touching me and they're kind of just like all over the place. If that bothers me a lot. and I have certain feelings and I'm like, oh, I'm in a PTSD situation. And it's hard. It is so hard because it catches you off guard. But I have drugs and that's fine. So I'm still kind of groggy and coming out of it.
We were going to come say trick or treat to you yesterday, but you were out of commission.
My dad sat outside on the porch to say hi to everybody that walked by, but nobody walked by.
Really? Nobody?
Well, maybe like
0?
Yeah, nobody came by until he went inside.
Oh, did you have trick-or-treaters come to your house?
I don't know. I was out.
Okay. You haven't discussed that with your family.
I am still in the basement from yesterday.
There was a lot of trick-or-treaters in our neighborhood.
Really?
Like, a lot. Yeah, but it was like people were doing what they should be doing, like not grouping together and all of that kind of jazz. And I just stuck all of our treats on a table outside and then let people pick up their own candy. So, and then I would go like refill the table every once in a while.
Did you see what our friend Becca did for Halloween, Anita?
Yes, I did. Oh my gosh, they're the coolest couple. She invited me to come over before the pandemic started to play with their claw machine in their basement.
What?
Did you know they have a claw machine?
No.
Yeah, they have a claw machine.
Very cool.
So this is a friend of Mel and mine who actually is my age in high school, but she's like super musician. So Mel and she are also in the same circles and community. But they're so cool. They're so rad. They had a vending machine
outside of their house.
Outside their house that was free. So you could just like walk up and be like, B7 and get your whatever. It's so cool. I wanted to go, but it was too late. Yeah.
Well, great idea, Becca. You're our hero.
She totally is my hero.
She's the best.
So Halloween for us, I had a pretty good Halloween, actually. But then today has been hard in weird ways. So
what's up?
I don't know. I'm having like these weird. My 4-year-old's talking to me. He just said, "Mom, I'm so happy you're still here." Dad's not. That's what he just said to me.
He just said that right now through the door.
Yes. Yes.
Guys, Anita, by the way, is recording by her toilet.
I am sitting on my toilet right now. Like, lid closed, but I didn't want to kick people out of my bedroom, and so I just came into the bathroom. Oh. It's okay. Yeah, he pops off with stuff like that all the time. He'll just say stuff that's so... Like, the other night I was putting him to bed, and he goes, "Everybody's dad will die someday."
Oh my gosh.
And I'm like, what? But yeah, it's true.
I know. How does he know that?
I know. And I just am like, what is going on in your tiny little brain?
Man.
So anyway, yeah, that's what he just said to me. Anyway, I'm having these really weird, I don't know what to call them, but I'll be walking around and I'm like, Jason's not dead. Like, this is not real. This is not real. Like, this, enough. Okay, this was a fun little joke, and now can we just not be doing this anymore? And I feel like that happened a little bit right in the beginning, but then not. And then I'm doing it again, so I think it's really weird. I mean, it's been a long time. It's not like I saw him last week or anything. So
interesting.
Just having a lot of that. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that I'm finally cleaning stuff out. Like, I looked through the pills and I was like, okay, well, he doesn't need these pills anymore. Or I threw away his razor. You guys, his razor has been in the shower this whole time.
Oh.
So, but like that kind of stuff, like, what the heck? No, you're not dead. This is stupid. No, I refuse.
And maybe you think that he's going to come back, so you shouldn't throw it away because you don't want to spend $7.99 to get a new one.
Yeah, men's razors are super expensive.
What about Occam's razor?
I don't know how expensive that one is. That one's theoretical.
Yes.
So I don't know.
Well, let's hope we survive another week. I'm sure we will.
Yeah. I'm making some pan de muerto right now, which is dead bread.
Dead bread.
That's what it is. It's like the traditional Dia de los Muertos bread. I made some last year too, remember?
Yeah.
It was not that great. This will probably not be that great either. So the other thing about it being November 1st is, guess what it is, Mel? You gave me such a hard time about this last year.
No Sugar November.
Yep. It's No Sugar November. Mm-mm. Yep.
I don't
I have gone the whole day without eating any candy.
I have a question.
Which has been very hard. Yeah. What's your question?
Can you have sugar-free candy? Does that count as no sugar November? That would be doable.
That's an interesting question that I've never thought about. I'm going to say no.
Well, who decides the rules?
I do.
Oh.
And my sister. We decide the rules. But the thing about it is, if there's something you really want to eat, you can eat it. There's no you don't get fired or anything. So, and I eat stuff with sugar in it, just no candy and no cookies or ice cream. So there you go. Sometimes we assume that unless we had a huge life insurance payout, we don't really need to know anything about investments or even finances. But guess what? A little knowledge of finances is critical for all of us. Maybe your partner was in charge of that stuff, and now you find yourself making all the decisions. Maybe you're mad about that. Maybe I am. Nicole from the He's Gone But the Money's Not podcast is here to help. She tackles financial literacy by telling the stories of women and widows and finance experts, and shares the lessons they've learned as certified financial planners. Whether you know a lot and feel confident in your financial decisions or feel unsure about all of that stuff, there is more to learn. Listen and subscribe to the He's Gone But the Money's Not podcast on all podcast platforms. This ad was paid for by Rockhouse Financial, an SEC registered investment advisor.
Oh, well, that's pretty good. I think this is a better year to do it than last year. I just was super worried about you last year for going through all these firsts and dealing with no sugar November.
Yeah. So it's that again. So we'll see how it goes.
Speaking of our Patreon, haha, did you know that we have a dead husband now?
We do, which is a little bit confusing because
he's alive.
Yeah.
Thank you, David Kelly, for being our dead husband. If any of you would like to join David Kelly in being our dead husband, we are definitely into theoretical plural online marriages in this situation.
Theoretical plural online marriages.
Okay, guys, it's time for
the Patreon patronages shout out.
Woo!
So we have the real favorite sister,
Marjorie Lewis,
Wendy Black,
Ashley Hahn,
Kara Scara, which is appropriate for Halloween.
She's so Scara. Jenny Taylor,
Miss My Mom.
Did she get mad at you last time?
She was like, "Don't use my name. It's okay if you say my mom." I'm like, what do you think is going to happen?
My mom, Sylvia Shore.
The Winehouse, a.k.a. Karen, from Canada.
Rachel Barbosa.
Ileana Bell.
Anna Tracy.
Gabe Lozano.
Aaron Posick and the Baby Joeys.
Aw. Jenny Barrow.
Christine Anderson.
Diana Becker.
Sarah Morris. And of course, our dead husband,
David Kelly.
You can be a female and be our dead husband too, just if you guys want to know. So thanks to all our patrons who are patronizing us.
Patronizing? Is that better than patronizing? Because patronizing is like they're there and pat us on the head, whereas patronizing is just like, here's some money.
It's the positive connotation.
Okay, beauty. Are you ready for our guest?
It's the Fancy Lady Part 2.
Part 2, where we're going to talk about some good stuff.
It's a good thing that she's so awesome and positive, because right now Anita and I are just complete messes.
I'm Anita.
I'm Mel.
We're just two young widows trying to figure out
Widow you know.
Mel.
What?
It's time for part 2 of the Fancy Lady. Are you ready?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So, for those who are not caught up, our guest today is Joy Kirsch Schwank. We learned that last time. And we have scheduled her for a few interviews because she has such a wealth of knowledge and you guys all need it. So we think it's only going to take 3 interviews and then we will know everything that she knows.
Everything.
Everything.
Maybe a few less than 3.
How many interviews do you think it would take for you and I, Mel? Like 1.2
For what?
interviews to have all of our knowledge.
A half of an
Definitely
episode.
Definitely less than 3. Anyway, welcome, Joy.
Again.
Yeah, thanks, Mel.
Again.
Thanks for coming and being our friend, our new fancy friend.
Well, that sounds so much better than old. Isn't that what y'all put me in the category of before?
No,
Probably Anita did because she's rude like that.
that was the worst ending I've ever done. And I just I don't think of those beforehand, and I really should. So
Sometimes our off the cuff bites us in the butt, and sometimes it's brilliant. We never know.
it's like equal one way or the other. So in our first interview with Joy, we learned a little bit about her job as a financial planner and how she has used that to help serve the widow community. And when we were discussing possible topics, this one came up because she is passionate about helping widows have money.
And not get taken advantage of.
Is that a fair statement?
Yes, and have, that sense of confidence that comes with being in control and feeling like you're secure and you're not vulnerable, all those things that we feel when we're first widowed. I want to get rid of all of that.
So Joy, can I tell you my experience when Jason died with finances?
Please.
So Jason was a school teacher, and so he had a 401k with the school district. And then he also had a 457 with the school district, which I still don't even know what that means, but I hope you know what it means. You probably do. And then every once in a while, they would let people come in from the outside world. I don't even know what to call the people that they were, but they would say, hey, invest money with us. We'll take care of your 401ks. So every time somebody came in to do that, he would start a new 401k. So when he died, he had like 7 401k or different investment accounts, and they were all not very much money. So he was going for quantity over quality, but it was like I had this giant vomit of paperwork to deal with. And he had 3 different life insurance policies that were like not a ton of money. But again, it was not that I had to deal with just one life insurance company. It was 3 life insurance companies. It was like the school district had one, and then I had one from an old job that I'd signed up for, forever and ever ago. So anyway, that was my experience when Jason died, was trying to navigate, oh my goodness, what do I do with all of these accounts? How do I consolidate them? And then what do I do with them? And I was so stressed out. My family can tell you that I was like so stressed out, not knowing what I was supposed to do, the steps I was supposed to take, how I was going to take care of that money, and not just like squander it away and it would be gone and I would feel like I had messed up. So that's my experience right after Jason died.
I have to tell you, Anita, that is the most common thing that I hear widows say is, I wish I knew what I owned and where it was and what its purpose was. So the fact that Jason was such a people person, you said he went for quantity over quality, but I think he was really going for a quality of relationships, right? I mean,
he really couldn't say no. That's why he would sign up for all of these new things, because they would come and he'd go, okay.
You want to disappoint anyone, but that left you with quite a mess. And the irony is that you're at a time in your life where your brain isn't functioning to its normal high level, and you're trying to learn all these new things with a poorly functioning brain.
Yes.
And so it's like double jeopardy, and it's just not fair, but it's something that's so important for us to address while we're still married. And nobody wants to think about the fact that maybe your spouse could end up not being there and you'd need to know these things. So I think there's this combination of not wanting to talk about something as awful as death, and we divide and conquer in our marriages, right? We divide up our activities. And so a lot of women are not interested in the financial things. And so as long as they have their credit cards, I hate to make such gross generalities, but as long as we are paying bills, sometimes the women pay the bills but don't do the investments, And that's part of the beauty of being in a marriage is we can divide and conquer. But I really encourage all women to at least know what you own, where it's located, and what its purpose is. So that if you're ever in this position, God forbid, you know what to do, who to call, and where to start, really.
Yeah. Well, and I knew all of the things he had because I did all of the paying of the bills, and also like I kept track of all of the files. So I like knew where to go, where the papers were, and kind of a general idea. It was just the mountainous task of trying to consolidate that and then what to do with it afterwards. And I also felt guilty because I thought I need to be thankful for this problem.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he has it retirement accounts. Like this is a good problem to have, but it still felt like a problem.
Well, and when there's 7 of them, it still comes out to the same amount of money as if it had just been one, right? But you had to do the same task 7 times. And school districts are notoriously difficult for processing all the paperwork. And so my heart goes out to you because I know with having 4 kids on top of that, it's a lot to try and manage with sometimes a poorly functioning brain. So kudos to you, but it's not just like checking the boxes on the forms, right? Then once you get it all consolidated and you get it in your name and you set up your new beneficiaries, then you've got to say, okay, what do I do with this money? How do I invest it? Is the way it was invested before still appropriate? Was Jason even really paying attention, or was he just getting advice from that 7th person who came in and said, here's what I've got for you? And so it may not have been managed from a cohesive standpoint that made a lot of sense. What was your experience with that?
Oh, yes to all of those things that you just said. He was not paying attention to any of it. He just said yes to the people who came. When it came time to figure out what to do with it, I would have loved to have a Joy hanging around that I could have said, this is who I need to go to. I ended up interviewing 3 financial planners, and it was really, I was so stressed out about it. And I thought the same thing that you just said, that, you know, this is different now. This isn't investing for, you know, for when I'm 65 or whatever. This is going to have a different purpose. And the person who is going to handle this money needs to understand that this situation is different. So, yeah, it was very stressful. And I went and met with a few people. I actually took a family friend with me because, like you were saying, my brain wasn't working. They were saying words to me and I was just like, you know, I don't understand the things that you're saying. So I took somebody I trusted with me so that they could kind of bounce off. And I kind of went with the feelings that I felt when I met with the people, which I'm not sure that's a good way to do it or not. But I also relied on that other person to kind of help me be logical about it also.
That's great to bring a second set of ears, because also in stress, it's like when you get that diagnosis, we don't hear anything beyond that. And I think our brains stay in that foggy area. And so when we're going to try and learn about something new, we're often, again, we're not able to process and learn from the same cognitive level as we normally do. And we're in this position where people are throwing big words at us, technical words. And so I think that's another issue that is often overwhelming for widows, is trying to find the right financial advisor. And you mentioned that you went with your gut or with your feelings. I think it's really important to recognize that money is more than just the technical side, right? It's also very personal. And in fact, you know, we like to say that both the technical side and the personal side are equally important and equally complex. You've got to address both of them. And I don't think all financial planners do that because they're not necessarily trained in life-changing events. They don't understand how grief affects our brains. And we really have to have extra training around that to understand how to work with widows or any client in transition, so that we can recognize if we don't address the change itself, it's kind of that big elephant in the room, right? You cannot just address the money without addressing the change itself, because so much has changed when you lose your spouse, and you do have to address your money differently. but you have to do it from both the personal side and the technical side.
I love how Mel is saying nothing.
She is kind of being quiet, isn't she?
You guys, it's because I had nothing. No life insurance.
Which is a problem in and of itself, right? That's a different kind of problem.
Yeah, I just never exited the 100% reliant on myself situation, even while I was married, because it was in transition. So I'm learning. I'm just listening.
But is that a gift?
Oh man, when I died, here go the migraine drugs. Oh my gosh. When Scott died, one of the thoughts that kept coming back to me was, I am so glad that I know how to work and that I'm already plugged into a system, into a community of musicians, because I was gigging and teaching at the time, and I never stopped that. And it was interesting because when we got married, Scott was saying, you could kind of like back off on some of those things because now there are two of us. And for some reason, I did not trust him, and I felt like a jerk. I didn't know if it was because I was like not trusting of another person, or when he died, I was like, oh, well, my intuition was just like right on. Like, I'm so glad I didn't. But I just kept feeling for those that did not have a job, or they had been stay-at-home moms and had these kids to take care of and didn't have maybe experience in the workforce, or had just been out for a while. So yeah, I mean, I'm really glad that I, in hindsight, was in that position, because I haven't had to have I have not made any money from Scott's death, but I already had the skills to work forward through those things. So yeah, but these resources that you're going to be talking about, I'm so excited for people to hear, because so many of these things, like, I had no idea about. I had no idea there were so many facets to this.
My brain just, as I listen to you talk, and my brain is just spinning of all the things that you bring up that are so important. I want to ask you about what you said about being happy that you hadn't pulled away. Because remember, I was a young widow too. And so I was equally grateful that I had a career, that I knew how to earn money, that I knew how to provide value to the economy. But I feel like I totally lost my confidence when my husband died. So he and I were partners in our firm. And yet, when I lost him, I felt like I wasn't going to be able to do it without him. Did you go through any of that, Mel? I mean, maybe it's a little different because you weren't partners, you were in a different industry. But do you lose your confidence at all, or was that just a me thing?
I think because I had already been divorced and been single for like over 10 years between my divorce and remarrying, the struggle that was hard for me was like not the independence part, but was like sharing that independence with someone. So, but I can totally see how if you are business partners with your spouse that has then died, oh man, totally. If Scott and I were involved in a partnership, I don't even know what I would do. Even though I have skills to work and all that stuff, it's just like I would feel so lost.
Well, the struggle is real. And I do know, I've talked to other widows who say the same thing, like they lost their sense of self. And so they lost their confidence, and they didn't feel like they could do anything to the same degree that they did before. But it's interesting to me that when you're faced with having to work, which for some women, like you say, those women who are taking care of the kids and who weren't left with adequate resources, they may have to go back into the workforce. They may have to start at a much lesser rate than they left the workforce if they ever were in the workforce. But truly, I mean, that's what we're faced with as widows is now it's all on us, right? We've got to be the ones to determine, do we have enough? What's it going to take? And so you've got to address all these different issues. And so I think of it as finding your footing by first asking yourself, are you safe? And so I think that's one of the most important things we have to ask ourselves as widows. Are we safe? And I think from a physical standpoint, that's the first thing we have to address. Do we feel safe in our homes? Because now we don't have this protector in the home with us. And so is it still a place that we're comfortable being at night? So are we safe physically? Are we safe emotionally? And then are we safe financially? And with our finances, the first thing we have to do is just say, do I have enough liquidity, right? Beyond investments, do I have enough liquidity to cover my expenses? I find that a lot of women have no idea before widowhood what their monthly expenses really are. What's your experience with that?
A couple episodes ago, Melissa Ponder Brackman was talking about this, and when her husband died, she said that he was the one that was in charge of taking care of all the expenses having to do with the day-to-day living expenses in the house. And so when he died, she was like, I don't know.
Yeah, how to do that.
You're going to die, Joy, because even though I was the one who paid the bills, we always joked that we budgeted by hope. And that was, I hope I have enough money.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And I still say that. I'm like, my budget is hope. Like, I hope there's enough money in my account, because I have never been good at budgeting. So when people would say that, like, what are your monthly expenses? I'm like, I don't know, whatever our paycheck is, we just spend that, we saved and things like that. But I just have never been super fastidious about writing down what we spend our money on. So I had no idea.
You needed my dad as your actual father-in-law because he's a CPA. He would have made you get a Roth IRA when you were 18.
I do have a Roth. Jason had a Roth IRA.
Of course, somebody else came into the school district.
Yes.
You guys, you silly kids.
We like to say in our industry that hope is not a financial plan. And that
is my financial plan, Joy.
Well, we're going to work on that, Anita.
Okay. Shoot.
It's interesting to me, too, that when women find themselves in this position of saying, oh, my goodness, I don't have enough, I'm not feeling safe, I'm not feeling secure, often the first thing they think about is, I've got to go find another husband.
No.
I know. Statistically, it's only like 8% of widows who remarry. I mean, I hate to throw that statistic out here for any of our listeners who are hoping that's going to happen to them, but I mean, 92% chance that it's not going to happen.
I have a question about that. As society has changed, have you noticed a difference in that statistic?
Well,
from when you were widowed versus now?
I think, since I'm the old one, I think that what's changed is that we may not always remarry, right? So I've repartnered, but I looked at the tax code and my partner had a full-time job. I had a full-time job, and I went, this doesn't make a lot of sense for us to actually remarry. Now, obviously, I won't qualify for any of his Social Security benefits. But until you're age 60, you really want to stay single if you want to qualify for your survivor benefits from your old spouse, right? If you remarry before age 60, you give up your widow's benefit from your spouse. So get married. If you're going to get married, do it at 60 years and a day. And until then, live in sin.
Oh, Anita, this means that we can't make our widow-wife partnership official until we're 60.
60 in a day, ladies, or you will both be giving that.
I just need somebody who's super more rich than a teacher made. That's all I need, because then maybe the benefits would be more than a teacher's Social Security benefit.
If he even qualified for Social Security.
Or how about you just go make tons of money yourself? Who cares?
I'm trying to with this podcast.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Right now, we don't make any.
Okay, I think that's a great idea. I think the odds are more in your favor to do that than to remarry with a knight on a white horse, right?
Totally. And I just think it's so important psychologically and emotionally in all of the ways to work on strengthening yourself.
Amen.
I don't even trust myself 100%.
I don't either, but
terrible decisions.
I think if we can learn these things on our own and become independent, self-reliant, really build our resilience muscles and learn to take care of ourselves, then if we meet someone and decide marriage is right, we go into it as a whole different person. If we
Yes.
don't ever put ourselves in that vulnerable position again where we're totally relying on someone else to take care of those details.
This is my favorite topic right now.
Why? Are you dating someone?
No, not at all. Just like the self-reliance thing. No, I would like to be a widow till I die. It's great right now.
You tell,
Right
because
now.
you're discovering things about yourself. Tell me what's going on to make you say that.
This also probably stems from my background with being divorced at age 23 and being self-employed as a musician. Like, it's an industry where you are always looked at as a failure. So I'm already used to this stuff, being 30 years old and someone's like, oh, that's so cute. You're a musician. Like, can you own your own car? I'm like, excuse me, please. You don't even understand what's possible. But so I'm used to all that stuff. So those things along the way have given me my own resilience and strength and helped me to realize what I need to not pay attention to as far as the naysayers and kind of trust my own gut and trust my own instincts. And so in my life, there's been a lot of things where there is no clear path at all. And it's like, I got to find my own way. Okay, well, here's what I want to do. Is there a path? Nope. I'm going to make a path. And so I've just noticed a lot of freedom and strength, even though it's so hard, that comes from all those things. And it's stuff that you can never learn unless you go through all the hard, scary things like grief, like how, you can equate it to that. So I love seeing people, and I talk about this with my students too. Like, I teach teenagers, I teach college kids, and a lot of them they're always looking to the outside for things to make them better. And all it is they need to figure it out from the inside. And so I love seeing transformations in people's lives and their outlooks by going through the hard things. So that's why I like to talk about it. And it creates a whole community of really resilient people that are also encouraging to others that can help lift those people up that maybe aren't as confident.
Oh, I love that. Yes. I mean, she thought she could, and so she did, right? I mean, that's such an important lesson to learn. And what I've seen in working with widows is when we learn these little technical things that we didn't know before, whether it's how to hang a towel rack or, hang a picture and make it perfectly even because we used our little levels, or figuring out your budget and how to make sure that your income is covering your expenses. Every time we learn to do something new like that and we do it successfully, it builds our confidence, and that helps us move through our grief. It doesn't, mean that we loved our husbands any less or that we've totally healed. It just means we are getting through it with confidence and a sense of purpose. And I think that's how we discover our gifts and how we live our best lives, whether we're remarried or widowed or forever chosen single. Mel, that's awesome.
I'm a golden girl at age 38. Well, and that another thing too, it's like some of the things that you never thought you could do, like you were saying, like when you said leveling the shelf and like making sure that it's right, stuff that maybe like traditionally a man would usually do, or a husband or something. When you figure out you can do those things, it's like, oh, it wasn't that hard. I can learn anything. I believe anybody can learn anything. One thing that I did is when I bought a travel trailer, and I'm like, I'm going to learn how to do this because it's going to be my new widow thing I do. And my dad was like, you can't back a trailer. I'm like, I know I can't. I'm going to practice. And guess what I can do now? I can back the trailer. I can go camping by myself. I can empty all the stuff. I can do anything that has to do with the trailer. I can like take it off the jacks. I didn't know how to do that a year ago. And it's not like I learned how to in one day. It's like every time I'd go out, it's like you learn it bit by bit, just like grief. It's like, well, I can't do today, but maybe I can do the next 5 minutes.
Yeah, little steps, right? And I mean, the same is true of money. And yet no one comes out of the loss of their spouse and says, oh, I don't want to learn how to back up a trailer. I want to learn how to manage money. I mean, people are just like, well, I don't know about money. And so I think it's become this area that people feel it's so scary and frightening and overwhelming. But really, it's just like learning to back up a trailer. You do it little steps at a time. and pretty soon you're pretty good at it. And talk about confidence. When you feel financially secure, that is true confidence.
Have you heard of the book called The Confidence Code?
Yes, I have it actually. I own it, but I haven't read it yet. So tell me more.
I've been listening to it as an audiobook. I love it. It's by these two women that study confidence in women. And then they kind of talk about leadership things and just they discuss their findings. And it's so interesting. And they were saying that the part that I'm in the book right now, which is going to lead me to the question I want to ask you, is about women in the workforce. And why are women scared to ask for raises? Why are they, and it discusses the development of the brain based on hormones. In this particular chapter, it's like females mature differently than males do during the school age time till they're in high school. And actually what happens is they even out over time, but the way that the females respond is, oh, I am not confident. They just are more shy. They take a longer time to process. And the guys are more apt to raise their hands even if they don't know the answer. And so they exude a little bit more confidence at certain important pivotal ages during school that then makes them think, oh, well, the girls are not as good at math as the guys are. But really, it has to do with these developmental things and where they are in school. So it's super interesting, that point. And then that chapter goes into a woman that wants to ask for a raise from maybe a man that's her boss. Okay, well, why is it such a hang up for her? Because a guy would probably just go, hey, like, I've done this. Can I have a raise? But a woman's going to stress about it, not ask about it. And in reality, maybe the boss doesn't even think about it. Like they talk about an example, how this woman wanted to have a raise and she stewed and stewed and stewed. And finally she went and she asked and she's like, I'm going to move past my guilt that I'm asking for this and my fear. And I'm going to ask. And the boss was like, oh yeah, sure. And then she goes, I just am curious, why didn't you ask me before? And the boss was like, oh, I just didn't even think about it. Like, you're doing your job. Like, we're just working. Like, I'm in my day-to-day tasks. So my question for you, that was a really long lead up to this question, is do you think that as females, our kind of stress around the money situation has to do with those factors that are psychological, that are hormonal, that are parts of society where women aren't earning as much? Do you think that we are in a different, more vulnerable state because of those things when you see it in your business?
Well, I think widowhood is temporary, but being a female isn't, right? And so we've got both things happening to us at once. And there's that expression about women don't lack competence, they lack confidence. And I think you're absolutely right, Mel. It's developmental. And even if our brains even out, I think it's pretty clear that women process information differently from men. We think differently from men. And you mentioned it earlier that it takes us longer to process. And I like to describe it as men want to make a good decision. Women want to make a perfect decision. And in order to make a perfect decision, you have to have all the information. You have to be able to weed out the things that aren't the perfect decisions, where men can just take a little set of data, process it and go, here's my decision. Women are like, well, I don't know, I need to think about that, and how's it going to affect other people, and what's it going to mean to me 10 years from now, and do I really have all the data? And I want to talk to my friends about it, I want to talk to my mom about it, I want to talk about it to this total stranger in the grocery store checkout line. It just takes us longer to process information, but we still get to good decisions. I mean, that's the important thing to know. And even with money managers, there are so few portfolio managers in this country that are women. There are so few portfolios that are actually run by women, and yet they typically outperform by just a little teeny bit, but they outperform their male colleagues. So when we have confidence, we are very competent. But wanting to come to the perfect conclusion, the perfect decision really hurts us, because we end up not making a decision, which is in effect making a decision. If we leave our money in cash because we're waiting for the perfect investment and we lose years of investment opportunities, that hasn't helped us. That's hurt us.
As a financial planner, have you gotten resistance or pushback from anybody?
You mean because I am female? Oh, yes,
Yeah.
because I'm also in Texas, right, where it's still a very machismo society. And so it's interesting being a female business owner, because in my industry, it's still fairly male dominated. And you do have to be confident to go to typically men who head households and say, I can help you with this, and have enough confidence that they will believe you are competent. And that's been a struggle. Anita, I'm calling on you.
You just needed to go to Jason's school, and he would have taken you out
all this time. Jason.
You just needed to find this sucker. Okay, Joy. So now my question is, help us. What are some things that we can do, assuming that our husband hasn't died, things that we should do before they die? And then maybe like we found ourselves in this situation, what are the first steps we need to take after we find ourselves? That's probably a really long question, but do you know what I'm asking?
It is a long question.
Like,
but it's
tell us what to do.
Question, right? And I'm so glad you asked that question, because I do think, like we talked about before, I think the most important thing we can do when we are married is understand what we own, where it's located, and like now we're in such a digital society, right? So we have to know how we access that. And it's really helpful if you have a financial advisor in your life, that even if you're not the one who's predominantly in charge of that in your marriage, you still know who that person is and you feel like you can trust that person. But I think statistically, 70% of all widows fire the financial advisor within 3 years.
Why?
Interesting statistic, right? And I think the reason for that is that most widows were ignored because they were the female in the relationship. So they never developed a personal relationship with their advisor. But I also think many advisors without the proper training tend to belittle widows, maybe not even consciously, but, I've had so many widows tell me that they've met with their husband's advisors and gotten the equivalent of the little pat on the head, like, oh, little lady, you're just going to be fine. And that's typically not what we want to hear. We want to know, how are we going to be fine? Show me how this works. And so as widows, the first thing we have to do is figure out what we own, right? So where is it? What do we have? And there's two things that are most important, I think, for starters. Number one is coming back to that question of safe. Are you safe? Do you have enough liquid assets to pay your bills? And normally, the rule of thumb is to have 3 to 6 months worth of liquidity on the sidelines. I will tell you, when you're widowed, ideally, you want to have 3 years of liquidity.
Now that means dollars, right?
Oh, thank you, Mel.
For us non-financial people.
Thank you. So cash, yes.
Or Gatorade?
That could be a liquidity event. Gatorade, yes, that you're drinking. Doesn't usually pay your utility bill or your mortgage, though. So thank you for pointing that out, because that's another thing our industry is bad about, is using the vernacular, all those big fancy lady words.
It's intimidating and so fancy.
Or empowering once you understand it. So yes, do you not have enough accessible cash, right? Money that you can lay your hands on to pay your bills. So if you're not working, that means you've got to understand what all of your bills are and know what it takes you to live on a monthly basis, including those surprises that only happen 1 or 2 times a year, right? Maybe the mortgage, property tax, right? That only comes up once a year. The insurance on your house often only comes up once or twice a year. So you can't just be rocking along saying, okay, I got this down, and then boom, you get this property tax bill that's several $1,000s and you weren't prepared for that. So what are your total expenses, and do you have enough money in cash on the sidelines that you can cover those? And again, the good rule of thumb is 3 to 6 months in normal times. These are not normal times. And even, the rule of thumb for widows is don't make a major decision for the first year. I say it's 3 years, just like how much cash you need. And in fact, that's how much cash you need on the side. 3 years is because you need 3 years to work through this. So our first year is a fog, right? It's a total fog. The second year, everybody leaves us on our own. And we really go through things. I've had so many women tell me the second year is more difficult than the first. What do you think?
We've heard that too from a lot of people. I'm in my second year, and so I don't know if I can make a determination yet if it's going to be harder than the first year because I'm still
in it.
Still in it, but yeah. Mel?
Mine, I was expecting the second year to be worse because of everybody saying that, and it was better for me because there's just more space between the event of the death and because my stuff was tied in with my car accident too, and I was healing more. And so that first year for me was like death, like literally death, and like for my soul. So yeah, tell us more about the second year sucking super hard. I want to know.
So I think everyone handles this differently, which shouldn't come as a surprise to the two of you because even you have handled it differently. It depends on our life circumstances. It depends on our resilience skills. I think it also depends on whether our husband died suddenly and we had no preparation versus if he had been ill for quite some time, because we start grieving that, and the science says that our brain literally starts changing. The chemistry in our brain starts changing, so it starts changing the physiology of our whole bodies as soon as we hear about the diagnosis. So in my professional practice as a certified financial transitionist, we learned that there's 4 stages of transition. The first is anticipation. So if we know our husband is sick and perhaps death is inevitable, that anticipation stage is where we can start adjusting emotionally to the fact that we may be alone without him. And I find that widows who have had that time to prepare, when they get to the ending stage, they can address it typically better than someone where there was a sudden death and you're still going through the shock of it all. And then we go through this passage stage before we get to our new normal. And that passage stage is kind of like the chrysalis of the butterfly. There's all this ooey gooey stuff going on inside that. And if you rip it open before the butterfly's ready to come out, it's pretty nasty. And that's, to me, what happens in passage is we go through some really hard, difficult things of taking a couple steps forward, 1 step back, 3 steps forward, 6 steps back. There's times we feel like we're going crazy. Is anybody else feeling this? That fear, that chaos, but it's also this huge time of discovery that you sound like you're really in, Mel, where you're figuring out what you love and who you're going to be as your new normal. And I think that's an awfully beautiful thing. So I want to ask you, as you discover and go through this chrysalis process, are you thinking also about the money side?
Yes, I'm thinking in the long-term money side. Like I mentioned earlier, my dad is a CPA, and so that's always a thing. And he has to try and keep me in check because I'm in the creative side. And so it's like the classic butting heads of like, I want to do all these things. And he's like, yeah, but you have to have money. So that's always on my mind. So I've always been really pretty conscious of money and spending it and stuff and investment, like for the future too. So I've always had a Roth IRA, and now with building my online business, it's like, well, when you build a business, it's like, are you going to focus on just like a quick cash sort of a thing, or do you want something that's more sustainable? And so what I'm doing right now is investing in myself and making sure that I'm taking necessary courses that I need to take so that I am more apt to understand kind of how business works, how marketing works online, just doing the classic, like, I'm a female, so I must process all of the things and make sure that I have all my bases covered. But I'm trying to learn about how to make my business sustainable long-term instead of just for the next like 3 months or whatever.
That is awesome. And you're also, in doing that, increasing your own earning potential, which is something that I'm constantly talking to widows about. Because if you're working, you want to be earning to your full capacity. You want to have the nerve to go ask for that raise, but you also have to have the courage to go back and get additional skills training if that's what it takes. How about you, Anita? Are you feeling like you're on a path to improve yourself financially?
So the night that Jason died and we came home, that was one of the first thoughts that I had. And I just felt such a sense of relief that I had a highly marketable skill, that I knew that if I needed to, I could go get a job right then to support my family. The weight of that felt heavy, to change your entire lifestyle and how things have gone. But I knew that that was there. And I feel so stressed out for people who don't have that. When you were saying, you should have 3 years of savings, my first thought was like, but what if you don't? What are the steps that you take to get yourself there? Because I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like that's probably more rare than common, that people just have that much money. And I know that there's so many widows who don't have life insurance, or don't have, their husbands were worth more to them alive than they are dead. Mm-hmm. So I felt such a sense of relief that I knew that whatever needed to happen, I could make it happen. I went to school for a long time, and that was a big deal for me. I was always like, I'm not going to put my husband through school for, and work. I was like, we're going to put both of us through school. And that's kind of, I think it's switching a little bit to that, but that's not, especially where we live, that's not a traditional role. It's like, no, you work and you put your husband through school. And I was like, heck no, I'm going to go to school too. So anyway, I don't know if I answered your question, but now you have to answer my question.
Well, but
of what do you do? What do you tell people to do?
How do you do that? But first, I just want to acknowledge that it's so encouraging to me that your generation is saying, I'm not going to work and put you through school. We're both going to work and put us both through school. You recognize that it's important, not just from earnings capacity if you're suddenly on your own, but just from self-confidence capacity too.
Wait, so can I just get on my high horse about that for just a second? So I get so irritated when people are like, well, you need to get an education in case something happens to your husband. I'm always like, bull, you need to get an education, or you need to find what you love for you, because it's going to make you a better person. And then Jason died, and I was like, okay, and in case something happens to your husband too, but not just because of that. Okay, I'm off my soapbox. Right. You may continue.
You count.
You matter. Yeah. Okay, so how do you take those steps to get there? Well, first of all, remember, if your expenses, I don't know, let's use round numbers. If they're running you $3,000 a month and you're bringing home $4,000 a month, then you're covered, right? It's just that shortfall. So if it's flip-flopped and your expenses are $4,000 a month and you're only bringing home $3,000 a month, then you're short $1,000, right? And so you need $36,000 on the sidelines to help cover you for the next 3 years. How do you get that? Well, sometimes it means taking life insurance proceeds and putting them in an account that it's safe. Sometimes it means liquidating investments that were perhaps invested, but now you need to make them accessible and liquid so that you can get to them. Sometimes you have neither, right? You have no life insurance proceeds and you have no investments. So then you got to look at, all right, this formula is pretty simple. I either have to reduce my expenses so that they are lower than what I'm bringing in, or I have to increase my earnings. So for people who are blessed with investments and investable assets, they can potentially increase their earnings on those investments. That's very important to females, especially because we tend to be too conservative in our investing. So there is some definitely possibility for change and growth there. But if you don't have investable assets, that means potentially going back to school or improving your ability to earn a living. And sometimes, Mel, it may mean just going in and asking for a raise because you deserve to be making more than you're making now. But it's pretty simple. It comes down to we either have to cut our expenses or increase our earnings.
One thing that I am learning in my studies with all these courses that I've been taking is one common thread that they're all saying is time is not a renewable resource. Money is a renewable resource. Can you speak to that?
Wow, I'd love to hear about what they're teaching you and how that works. But the first analogy that comes to mind for me is when people talk about whether they should take out loans for their kids' education for college. You know, maybe they haven't saved enough and they're trying to decide, I've got money to save, and should I put it towards retirement or should I put it towards my kids' college education? Well, if resources are limited, although money is renewable, but one of those is time, right? Maybe your kids are going to school in 3 years versus you're not retiring for 20 years. So you're thinking, oh, I better put it towards my kids' education. But the reality is we can't borrow for retirement, right? You can't go out and take a retirement loan like you can go out and take a school loan. And
also, can't the kids pay for their own school? I had to pay for my school.
There you go. I think there's something to be said for that. And that's really hard for widows often who feel like they've got a responsibility. Perhaps, you know, they had already told their kids your college is paid for, and yet dad left and didn't leave the resources behind to pay for those college tuitions. And yet now mom feels this responsibility because they committed to it. That's really tough. And yet, isn't education an asset in itself? Aren't we giving the gift of being able to earn a living? So I don't know, maybe it's because I paid for so much of my own school that I feel like I valued it more. But also, you know, when the kids are 3, can't we just train them to be really smart so that they can get some scholarships?
I also would like to say, when I went through school, that was during my first marriage, part of it, and there are grants. So if you are a poor widow or a poor widow's child, there are definitely financial aid options available. The other thing, I've worked at a university on faculty for 15 years. And it is so interesting to me because I've been in the professional world at the same time as being in the academic world. And the academic world trend is that it's several years behind. Like, for example, I'll just talk to what I know, which is music. We're training these kids to be professional musicians. However, the universities are not affording the necessary mentorship programs or like getting them out into the professional world to be musicians. They're just like, well, here's like what Bach and Beethoven did. Cool. And it's like, okay, but are you teaching your students how to do all the digital stuff, all the stuff that's current? All my professional musician friends and my academic musician friends and my friends that are both, we all see these trends and we're wondering how viable university studies are going to be in several years, because there are so many amazing and affordable course programs that are done digitally online by professionals that give you actually the skills that you need and are starting to form connections. Like, for example, when I went to school for music, do you think I learned most of the stuff that I know about music from music school? Heck no. I learned it all on my gigs. I learned it by doing it. I learned it by application. But what I did gain was the connections that were very important to me. So there's a shift that we're noticing in certain areas with these trends, where the old traditional of like, well, you go to college and you have this degree, now you're going to make tons of money, where it's maybe not going to be the only way anymore. So that's another option for, I don't know if it's like online trade school, kind of an equivalent maybe, but there are many, many, many options out there that are not just traditional schooling. And then maybe if your child, when they get to that point of going to college or university where they do need the letters behind their name, hopefully they have enough job skills that they're making money and they can get their own education.
Or their employer will pay for that.
Yeah. So, I mean, who knows what's going to be available by the time, like Anita's kids they're super young, but maybe by the time they get to that age, there's going to be more chances for them.
Well, ironically, I think that COVID is going to fast forward that transition. I think it was happening anyway, but now, for better or for worse, we're doing so much training, so much more training online, that I don't think we'll go back to the traditional way of schooling. Right now in Dallas, we have one of the things we're voting on is this huge financial package to build all these new buildings. And our buildings in the Dallas Independent School District are like on average 50 years old. And I'm thinking, but really, do we want to rebuild them? Because are the kids going to be in school? Are they going to need as many classrooms as they needed before? Are they going to be doing half of it at home even after COVID goes away? Is it not going to change and look different? I think it has to change. You know, one of the things I help clients do is project their expenses into the future and apply an inflation rate. So we'll know what you're going to need 10 years from now, 20 years from now, versus what you have to pay today. Well, inflation, you know, runs between 2.5% and 3.2% on almost everything but education. College costs have been going up at 6 to 8% a year. That's not sustainable when you get out of school with all this college debt and then you go to work in a restaurant or doing some trade, like you said, that pays more than you could get a job for with your college education. I really regret that we've moved away from trade schools and that kind of training. And I think we'll see more of that, especially in music in those areas. So I want to take a breath, Anita, because I know you have something brilliant to say.
Okay. So you just said a word or a concept that was something that I had to learn about. And so I wanted to ask you to explain that a little bit more. So I came from a family that was like, you put your money in a savings account. You don't invest it. You don't have, you know what I'm saying? And so that was kind of something that I had to understand, that maybe putting your money all in a savings account wasn't the best approach. And we talked about having your savings that you can get to quickly, but then above and beyond that, not just putting in a savings account because it's not going to grow as fast as your money is becoming less and less worth money. Inflation.
Purchasing power, right? How much?
Yeah, that was like the
power.
kindergartner's explanation of inflation.
Yeah, that's so great that you bring that up, because over time, things shift. And I think if you grew up with parents who perhaps in the 80s, when savings accounts were paying 14, 15, 16%, that was one thing. But today, you know, when you go to the bank and put your money in a savings account, it's earning like 0.2%. And if inflation is running at 3% and then you have to pay taxes on the earnings, you're absolutely going backwards. So that money will be worth less to you in terms of purchasing power than it was when you deposited it. So savings accounts are great for one purpose. They give us liquidity. They give us instant access, right? They're not tied up. They're not at risk. If we put $1,000 in, we don't risk that we go back 2 weeks from now and it's only worth $850, right? That's a risk when we invest in the markets. Markets can go up or down. Over the long run, historically, they've always gone up. In fact, 75% of the time, equities or stocks give us a positive rate of return. But in that other 25%, when they don't, that's when we're taking risk, right? Because if that's when we need our money and it's potentially down in value, we were better off in a savings account earning nothing, right? So I'd like to talk about buckets and a bucket approach. But did you want to ask a question?
I did. And maybe you can address this now or later, but the idea of investing, how do you get over the fear that comes with that? Because I feel like it's such high stakes. You feel like there's a chance I could lose this. And I think that motivates a lot of our decisions, especially as widows, because you already feel like you've had this loss. And so you don't feel as courageous as maybe you would if you had your partner with you. And if you were like, well, we can figure this out, you know what I'm saying, together. It feels so much more when you're making that decision on your own, that you move from a place of fear as opposed to a place of logic.
Absolutely. And I mean, it really kind of comes back to what we were talking about when we were first talking about losing our confidence when we lose our partner, right? And it can be, well, think about it. The worst thing that could possibly happen to us has happened to us. So to some degree, logically, we might say, okay, we survived that, so we can survive anything. But emotionally, that's typically not where we go as women. We go to that other extreme of, oh my gosh, the worst has happened to me. What terrible thing is going to happen to me next? Am I going to die too and leave my kids as orphans? Am I going to lose all the money? Because now it's totally on me, where before I at least had a sounding board and someone else to blame if things go wrong, right? So it goes back to how we learn. I think we have to respect that it does take us more time to process, but we also do more things intuitively. And so that is both good and bad, because if we find the right people to trust who can partner with us along the way, that's a great thing. But if we end up trusting the wrong people, and often we're looking for a stand-in for our husband, right? We're looking for someone who can just take that role on. I was just thinking, it can also be good if we find the right person to partner with us. And I've had a lot of conversations with widows about that, because they beat themselves up for trusting the wrong people. But again, I think it goes back to acknowledging that our brains aren't fully functioning in those early months. And you really need to look for someone who has a history of doing what you're looking for to be done, right? So if you're trying to find a financial planner, how long have they been in business? Do they have references? And do they have specialized training in working with clients going through transition? Because we have to, I'm a certified financial planner, but beyond that, because I was never trained about grief in that academic training, I had to go and understand grief. I took the initiative on my own because I'm passionate about helping other women. But look for professionals who've taken that initiative, who've gone and gotten that extra training, because they understand more about how a widow's brain works. They understand that sometimes the best decision is to do nothing but sit with the decision, right? Sit with the change, process your answers, and a good trained transition planner will give you some tools from her toolbox to help you process that information, to help you understand it's okay to sit and not make a decision for a while, but also be active in the exploration of discovering who you are, what you value, and therefore how you need to align your money with that. You can only take the time to do that if you've got that liquidity, if you've got money to cover your expenses. And that's why I say 3 years, because transitions take time. And we live in a society that says, okay, your husband died 3 months ago. What's wrong with you? Get on with it. Aren't you out dating again? Aren't you remarried? That's not how transitions are meant to be lived. So I believe having that 3 years of liquidity gives you time and space, that space of mind, to figure out who you are and where you're going. And I want to tell you about the buckets, because this is how you can get rid of your fear. So I mentioned that over time, markets 75% of the time are up. Of course, it's that 25% that they're not that is so frightening to us. So what you need to do is actually look at the history of the markets. And there's no guarantee that what's happened historically is going to happen again, but it has happened historically over and over and over again. So I think it's about time in the markets rather than timing the market. There's a couple things that, just like your grandmom told you, don't put all your eggs in one basket. You want to diversify. You want to spread out your money so that you're not betting on one particular company. Because if that company happened to be American Airlines or the Marriott hotel chain, for example, anything in hospitality, you will have seen a decrease in value in those stocks, at least temporarily, right, while we're going through this difficult time. So the more you have your money spread out across all industries, if you own some, medical stocks, or you own some technology stocks, things that are actually doing extremely well because we're living at home and ordering from home, then those have done well. But your real risk with investments is being too short term, meaning you need to get that money out too quickly, because we don't know from one year to the next when we're going to have a positive year. So when I talked about having 3 years of liquidity or 3 years of cash on the side, what that tells me is that everything else that you have in the markets is going to be there for at least 3 years, right? You're not going to have to go in there and touch it to pay your utility bill or your mortgage. So that's one of the things that we're doing when we create what I call the income bucket, which is that cash liquid bucket. The other rule of thumb that I'll throw out at you is that academic studies show that for every dollar of expense that you have, you want 50 cents of your income to be guaranteed. Let me say that in a different way. Going back to our earlier example of if you have $3,000 a month in expenses, you want at least $1,500 of that coming from a guaranteed source. Now, our jobs are typically not guaranteed, right? But that's a pretty good steady source of income that I would throw into that mix. If you're retired, you've got Social Security typically. That is a lifetime guaranteed income. So you can't outlive it, and it's always going to be there in theory. So if you've got enough coming from your guaranteed sources that it covers at least 50% of those expenses, based on historical studies or academic studies, you're golden. But let's say your Social Security is only $1,000 and your expenses are $3,000. Now you've got that $500 differential that you need to purchase something that gives you a lifetime guaranteed income, so that you've got at least half of those expenses covered by something you can't outlive. So you want that guaranteed income for 50% of the expenses. You want your income bucket, which is your liquidity, to cover the rest. And if you have that for 3 years, then you can start looking at investable dollars. That's when you can start taking more risk in exchange for more return based on history. But even so, I would say to you, your money has to be there long term. And looking at the history of the markets, you need almost 15 years for stocks to outperform every other asset class. So at your ages, absolutely, y'all should be putting a lot of money in stocks that you'll use for retirement, because you've got 15 years before you retire. But what I would suggest to you is if you've got 3 years in an income bucket and it takes, let's say 14 based on history before stocks give you the best return always, then have that midterm bucket. Have those assets for your expenses in between that will be that combination of some stocks, some bonds, some real estate, that diversified bucket. Because when you diversify, you're taking a chance that some of your money will always be performing well when other money may not be performing well. So like right now, maybe you own some Amazon that's doing great, or some Walmart that's doing great, and you've got time to wait out your American Airlines and your Marriott, right? Because you've got this diversified bucket. So figure out what your expenses are going to be. When you're working, just make sure you've got enough income coming in to cover those and give you enough to save. But once you're retired, line up those expenses with how you invest your money so that your buckets align with when you need that money, so that you're taking the risk off the table of having to go out and sell a stock when it's potentially down.
When you talk about all of that, what it makes me think is that a lot of this, I think all of it, goes for widows and non-widows, trying to figure out how long it is until you retire and those things. And the thing that I just keep thinking of is, it seems like for most people, the important thing is finding somebody who can guide you through this, to help you navigate this, because just listening to this, it seems like a lot to ask a widow brain to process. And I actually remember having those conversations about the buckets with the financial advisors that I chatted with. And I just remember thinking, I just want somebody who will tell me what to do. You know what I'm saying? Like, who I can trust and say, this is what I have. These are my expenses. Tell me what to do. And I just came upon a term, and I wish I could find it, but it was basically like familiarity fraud. And it was basically taking advantage of people because you know them and you trust them. And then they come in and get you to invest in like a Ponzi scheme. And so, yeah, how do you go about finding somebody who can help you navigate this and not finding the person who's gonna be a terrible person? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. How do you find that?
Oh my gosh, Anita, that is such an important question, and something that I have widows telling me all the time. Oh my gosh, where were you? I ended up with this person who was one of my husband's best friends, and I lost tons of money because of that familiarity fraud. I think that's very common. And I think we are so overwhelmed as widows. We're having to be both husband and wife, often mother and father. Widows are the busiest people in the world, using brains that are not functioning at their full capacity. So I actually have a checklist for this that I wish I could get out to every single widow in how to find a good financial advisor. But it's true of your doctors and your lawyers and everybody else that you use as well. So I have to say that personally, in my own journey, in wanting to understand my poorly functioning brain and going out and getting more education about this, it has changed my life. And it has not just helped my widowed clients, but like you said, it really applies to everyone, but especially to widows, because part of my training and understanding transitions is to recognize that our brains are poorly functioning and using tools so that my widows can help process the information that they're getting. So, for example, we have a tool called the communications preference, and I use it for everyone, not just my widows, but it's designed for us to determine, how do we best process information? How do we retain information? How can we go into a learning environment so that it will be more comfortable for us and we will be able to process and retain? How do we normally make decisions? So that communications preference is a profile that I have my clients go through so that I can better support them in the learning process. Some people are more visual than others. Other people are auditory. Some people's eyes glaze over where there's numbers involved and they need to see pictures. So we do a lot of visuals and pictures with colors. Musical people, artistic people are very much that way often. But I mean, I'll give you another example. I did this with a widow, and it's been a while and I'm trying to remember. Oh, so she was talking to me about how to communicate with her. And she said, and I need you to often repeat things more than once. And I said, okay, so tell me, when I'm repeating them, how is it that you need to hear the information? How do you want it to present it to you? Do you want me to present it in pictures with more words? And she said, no, I am deaf in my left ear. And so I often need to hear things twice in order to hear them. Oh my gosh, can you imagine how many meetings that poor woman had been in that nobody's asked her that question? And so one of the things I learned from that, and that we agreed upon, was that I would always sit on her right-hand side in a meeting because she couldn't hear out of her left ear. How simple is that if we're trying to ask the right questions? So I think finding someone, again, who has a history of doing the work you need done and doing it successfully, so getting those references, but also looking at, have they taken the initiative to get specialized training, not just in the technical side of what you need, but in the personal side? Have they learned how a widow's brain functions and how to sit with her sometimes, which is the best thing to do often if we're at a place where we need triage, right? How to recognize the signs that sometimes it's okay just to sit and be rather than to make a decision. And once you're ready to make a decision, what kind of tools does she have to help you process information, determine what your values are, and then align your money with those values? I want to tell you about one more tool that I think is really important, and then I promise I'll quit talking. We have another tool that we use called the decision freedom zone or the decision free zone. And all it does is when I'll meet with a widow, because our brains have so many thought bubbles, right? I mean, you can just imagine all the little brain bubbles popping around a widow's head because we've got so many things that we feel like we need to do and so many responsibilities. So the first thing we do is a mind map where we'll sit down together and I say, just tell me everything on your brain. And we throw it up on a big board. And then I'll make a visual of that is literally all those thought bubbles. But from those thought bubbles, we have an exercise that we do to help a widow narrow that down to what's the most urgent and the most important. And we basically look at it as now, soon, or later. So we want to take all those thought bubbles, know that because we've seen them and they're up there, they're going to be addressed. But what are the most urgent and important things that we need to do now versus what can we put off till sooner or later? Because when you will narrow down your limited brain cells to focus on just one or two things, we're so much more productive. And when we're more productive, we feel successful, we feel confident, and we get to move through our grief.
Is there a way people can access or find people who have this additional training or who fit this profile? I mean, I know that you can go check out somebody's credentials, like is it the FINRA, if they're FINRA certified, to make sure that they, and if they're a fiduciary or if they're not a
words. Wow, look at you.
I'm telling you, I did this and I came out the other side. So I know some of these things, but you could maybe explain what those two things mean. And then is there a list, and is a transitionist something that people should look for, or is it not necessary, but maybe a bonus?
Well, it's certainly not necessary. It's not required. In fact, you don't even have to hire a certified financial planner, right? You can just hire someone who has their stock brokerage licenses. But I want to go back to the word you just used, which was fiduciary. So there's been a big move in our industry towards educating clients about the difference between a fiduciary and someone who is not. So a fiduciary has to do what is in their client's best interest. Someone who is not a fiduciary just has to make recommendations that are suitable. Okay, that was the old law, and now it's all in the process of being changed because guess what? All clients assumed that their advisors whom they hired to help them were acting in a fiduciary capacity, right? They assumed that their advisor was looking out for their best interest, but in fact, that wasn't the standard for all advisors. So as a certified financial planner, you are a fiduciary just by having that designation. You've done extra studies, but again, I took the test, and that was one of the questions on the test. As a certified financial planner, is your work about the technical, about the personal, or C, all of the above? Well, you're supposed to answer C, all of the above, but then you go out into the real world and you get a job and it's all about the technical, make sure you're getting your clients invested. Well, that is not what my practice is about because I charge fees for my time. You don't have to invest or buy anything with me. I'm going to walk you through the process, but I wouldn't have been able to do that if I had not gone on and gotten additional training through my certified financial transitionist designation. And yes, thank you very much for asking. You can find a list of those at the website, which is suddenmoney.com. You can go search by your area and find a trained certified financial transitionist. And I highly recommend that for widows because these people have taken a lot of additional time to put into learning both the personal along with the technical and all the tools we can use to help a client integrate those two, because ultimately we want her to have a more successful outcome. We don't believe we can take away the pain of widowhood, but I've done my job better if I can make that shorter, but even if not shorter, less painful. If we can make the outcome more successful for you because we recognized the issues you were going through personally as well as technically and helped you integrate that, I've done a good job.
So when I was interviewing the different people that I interviewed with, it's true, because some of the people, their meat and potatoes was getting you ready for retirement, right? And I was like, I'm in a different position now. I'm not just worried about that. And the person that I ultimately went with was not a transitionist, but he gave me references to other widows that he had worked with. He got their permission first. And I called those people and asked them what their experience was. Do you recommend people do that? Ask for references or try and get something to tell them whether or not they're good at what they do? How do you do that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And without a doubt, there are great advisors out there who are very empathetic and good with widows, right? Because they are empathetic people and they care. And in no way am I trying to demean that quality, which is extremely important. And a lot of advisors don't have that quality. And so that to me is without a doubt extremely important. But I would go on and say, even to those people with empathy, take that empathy and go develop your skills. Become a certified financial transitionist so that you don't just care about the outcome, but you actually have some tools to help your widows improve their outcomes. That's the difference.
I would have looked for somebody who had that word had I known that was even a word back then, but I didn't even know that was a thing. I didn't know there was such thing as a transitionist. I just was like asking friends and family about who they knew and who had done good work for them. So I love that there's a resource that you can look and find somebody and then do your homework on it. And the other thing that I had to keep in mind, and you said this, was that it was not a rush. It felt like it was a rush. Like, I need to get all of these ducks in a row right now, as if Jason wasn't going to be dead forever, and I felt that. And now looking back, I think, why was I in such a hurry to do that? That all of those 401ks were going to stay, they don't like evaporate after 3 weeks. You know what I'm saying? And so there's just like just pause and take a minute and don't rush into those things, because it's not like maybe there is a timer on certain things, but I don't really think there's a timer. And if there is, it's longer probably than we assume that it is.
Yes, we have 4 years to go through probate. Typically the timing is if there's a tax return due. But that's why if you're working with a transitionist, they're going to help you determine what you need to do soon versus later versus now, right? And sometimes the tax return is a now issue, but there are very few of those. Paying your utility bill is a now issue, right? But the investment decisions are typically something, if you'll create that income bucket with 3 years worth of liquidity, you've bought yourself some time. And that's exactly why I don't care what anybody says about don't make any major decisions for a year. I think it's 3 years with the widow's brain, because females process information differently. It takes us longer. And quite frankly, we don't even know who we are when we're first widowed. It takes us some time to figure out what that beautiful butterfly is going to look like on the other side of our passage, on the other side of that chrysalis.
So, Joy,
yes,
here's a big question. You talk about these checklists. Can we have them?
Absolutely.
To post? Okay, awesome.
I want to get them out to as many widows as possible.
And so you have this awesome thing that you send out, but people don't have to be your client to use that?
No, Anita, my passion is to educate as many women as I can. So my time obviously is limited, but like we talked about at the very beginning, money is renewable, but time isn't. So my minimum investment client is $1 million. Not everybody has $1 million, right?
What?
Joy,
I want to be a financial
you
planner
are so
now.
fancy. We didn't even know.
You are so fancy. Okay, so you're not going to take my $100.
But here's the thing. I work with a team of people who that is my whole big deal is I don't care if you can't be my client. I still want you to get the help you need. So I have a whole team of people that I've just put through 6 weeks of training, and we're doing ongoing training that's related just to widows and understanding widows. So they're the people, like you talked about, Anita, they have the empathy, but they wanted more skills. So we're trying to give them more skills, but that's my issue is I don't want to only help people with $1 million or more. I want to help every single widow that I can to move the needle. So, statistically, a widow has 3 to 4 times a higher likely chance of being poor in retirement. 50% of widows feel less secure financially than before they lost their husband. Those are the statistics I want to move the needle on.
So Joy, we've already had you on and we've never had this problem before, but we've already asked you your cheese question. You're the fancy cheese, the French fancy cheese, of course.
Of course.
So now we have to come up with a new question, and I have it, and it's, what's your favorite kind of licorice? Black licorice, red licorice, Twizzlers.
What if she hates licorice, Anita?
She can't.
Kidding? Red licorice, hands down.
Twizzlers or red vines?
Twizzlers.
Twizzlers. Okay. I will accept your answer. I like them all. So
I'm pretty sure that's gluten-free and dairy-free.
it's not.
No, they're not
Twizzlers
gluten-free.
are not
What?
gluten-free. Nope. Thank you so much for joining us today for our second part with fancy lady Joy Kirsch. We appreciate all of the information she has. Kirschwank. Just remember to check the show notes because Joy is going to hook us up with a checklist for finding a financial advisor that won't steal all of your money and run away to the Bahamas. And also it has a checklist for just general widow-y financial things. And then a way to sign up to get some information in a slow way to help you make good decisions for your finances in the future.
And just a reminder, please sign up for our Patreon. It's just as low as $5 per month, which is 2 tacos per month. I cannot speak.
2 tacos per month.
Patreon.com/WWDN.
And join our Widow Wives Club. And until then, I'm Anita.
I'm Mel.
And I'm the fancy lady.
We're just a couple of young widows and a super fancy lady. We didn't even realize how fancy she was. And we're just trying to figure out
what do we do now.
Okay.
This is my favorite thing to discuss with you.
Tell me, what is it?
One of my favorite things. I do enjoy tacos and cheese and dogs. This is about how you cannot pay hundreds and hundreds of dollars for a phone plan, especially when you're a widow, your person is dead, you might have kids, you might need another option, and you just want your phone to work, you want unlimited texting and service, and you want it to be like $25 a month.
It blows my mind that they have plans that start at $15 a month. That is so cheap. And the cool thing is it uses other 5G networks. And so you don't have to pay extra for that. And you still get great service.
Yep. Anita and I have traveled all over and I have used my phone. So I highly recommend it. And my mom's even on it. When my dad died, we put his phone down to the cheapest plan, which is $15 a month. And I think my mom's on the $20 a month plan and it's so worth it. It's so much cheaper than what we were all paying before. So I highly recommend it if you're on a budget or not. Who cares? Ryan Reynolds is in charge of the company and they send you free stickers with Ryan Reynolds temporary tattoos. It's kind of the best. So if somebody wants to sign up, what can they do, Anita?
Go to trymintmobile.com/WWDN. Seriously, you guys, such a great idea. Save yourself some money.
And if you're worried about losing data or having any changes with your phone, not going to happen. They walk you through it. Everything's fine. It's the easiest process of all time. Again, that's
trymintmobile.com/WWDN.